Everybody, Mike Beer here with the look at the feature race on Monday, Memorial Day at Lone Star Park. We're going to close down that Memorial Day card with the final race, the Grade 3 Steve Sexton Mile, which once again drew a very big and competitive field for that Memorial Day feature. Speaking of Memorial Day, before we get to the entry card for the Steve Sexton Mile, we do have that Memorial Day sale ongoing at DRF.com. You can head on over to shop.drf.com, see what's available over there for up to 50% off. It includes past performances, clocker reports, a lot of good stuff. I'm not going to read it out to you. You can see it right there on the screen. But you still have time to get over there for that Memorial Day sale, shop.drf.com, and see what you can do there for up to 50% off. Here's the field for that Grade 3 Steve Sexton Mile, $400,000 purse. It's a two-turn mile on the main track at Lone Star Park. And this race, it never fails to deliver. It always feels like it gets a pretty competitive field. The 2023 renewal is no exception to that. 12 horses entered. I feel like there are a lot of different horses that can win here. Trips are probably going to be very, very important in this race. The morning line favorite is drawn towards the outside. Number 11 is Touch Upon a Star, raging form coming into the Steve Sexton Mile. It's a class hike for this horse. They're going to step him up here to face some tougher competition, and it's about time because this horse is on a real roll right now. He's just blowing out Louisiana-bred competition, and he's running one fast race after another. He's never faced horses like this. This is a big class test for him, but it's time to step him up here. We'll see what this horse is made of. He's your morning line favorite. Second choice on the morning line is the number 8, Endorsed. He's 7-2 on the line. He's got a couple of recent races that'll give him a real chance in here. They tried a Grade 1 with him on Derby weekend. It didn't work out. This is a much more comfortable spot for a horse like Endorsed. His recent form is pretty good. He's got back races that suggest the two-turn mile is really no issue for him, even though he's been competing mostly in one-turn races recently. The distance isn't really supposed to hinder him in this race. Third choice on the morning line is the number 7, Silver Prospector at 4-1. He's your defending champion in this race. Won the Steve Sexton Mile last year. Has a race in him that makes him really, really tough in a race like this, but he's just a little inconsistent. He's 4-1 on the line. And it's your call, what kind of price you really want to take on him. But he's certainly another horse who could easily win this race. Let's start out talking about the contenders. We'll go right down to the rail. The number 1, McLaren Vale. Still pretty lightly raced as a 4-year-old. Only 10 starts behind him. He was a debut winner sprinting as a 2-year-old at Santa Anita. He's only won for 9 since then. That win came on a sloppy track against entry-level allowance horses at Indiana last summer. He also finished first in a two-turn mile at Delaware Park last October, but was disqualified from that victory. He's made 3 starts this year for trainer John Sadler. They sprinted him a couple of times, one of those in a Grade 3 where he was never really a factor. Stretched him back out last time. I thought he ran okay. He didn't get the greatest trip in the world. I don't think he had some kind of huge excuse, but it was a relatively slow pace. The field was compact. He was sort of between and behind horses for a long way in there. And I thought he tried pretty gamely through the stretch. He was never a real threat in there. The winner, who was a long shot, sort of just took over and got clear through the stretch there. I thought McLaren Vale did pretty well. He just missed second. It wasn't the kind of performance that made me, necessarily want to bet him back in a race like this, but he's a big price on the line. He's got a great post. He has good tactical speed, and I do think he could take a step forward in here. Those are all positives for a horse who's 30-1 on the morning line. The number 2, Mind That Star, 20-1 on the morning line, comes off of a stakes win, off of a little bit of a layoff, going 9 furlongs down at Sunland Park. We'll take a look at the replay of that race right now. Nice 90 Beyer speed figure for this performance. He just got a perfect trip in this race. It's only a 5-horse field. He sat right off the leader. He took over around the second turn. You see him driving clear through the stretch and not really threatened. I thought the runner-up ran okay in here. He's really trying through the stretch. The other 3 horses just didn't really do anything. I'm not sure he faced the strongest field there. The perfect trip obviously worked in his favor, but he ran a 90 Beyer there. He's got some, faster figures from early last year when he was a stakes winner also at Sunland Park. So he's not that hard to make a case for in here, and he's a great price on the morning line. I'm not going to knock this horse. I just didn't really want to bet him in here. The number 3 is Allege, stepping up at the right time, it seems like, for trainer Steve Asmussen, who's got a couple of horses in here. Allege has now won 5 races in a row. And so they're going to step him up and see what he's made of here to try a tougher race with him. Did earn the 94 Beyer speed figure at his most recent start, but that's a 1.25 miles. One of those 1.25 miles races that Churchill Downs seems like they're the only ones that run those for the sort of the cheaper horses. And this horse handled it well to get the job done in there. He also shows a couple of wins right here over course and distance from last spring and summer. Those are against weaker horses, however. We'll see how he handles the class rise. He's going to be a big price in this race, and he's obviously in really good form right now. Just not my kind of horse. I think this is going to be pretty tough for him. The number 4, Holden the Loot, the first of a couple of horses in here for trainer Robertino Diodoro. Diodoro just taking over the training of this horse. Another horse who, listen, he's got very competitive form in Southern California. They sort of move around distances with him. They sprint him a lot, but he's also pretty effective when they stretch him out in distance. That was the case 3 starts back, and I thought he ran fine in that race, going a mile and a 16th at Santa Anita. He wound up second best that day with a 90 Beyer. He came out of that race, though, with a really nice performance, winning a 7 furlong sprint there with a 96 Beyer. That was a good effort. I just like his recent form, and he's the kind of horse who I feel like can fall into a trip in this race as they stretch him back out to a distance that's not too far for him. 2 turns is no problem for him. I just thought he was a little interesting. He's 12-1 on the morning line. I can't say that I love him, but if he's some kind of big price in this race, I wouldn't mind using him. All Diodoro has to do, in my opinion, is keep him in the form that he's currently been in down in Southern California. The number 5 is Frosted Grace, also for Diodoro. This horse is in really good form right now. Diodoro claimed him for $32,000 at Keeneland last October. And he's just, been in really good form since he's come back this year with a couple of wins, a couple of close seconds, including this effort that we're going to look at right now. This is at Oaklawn Park in a $150,000 stakes race. This horse ran great in here. His rider was just sort of concerned throughout the running with Mr. Wireless. The horse is going to wind up third. Mr. Wireless is odds on in this race, and his rider was just sort of concerned with that horse, sort of stalked him around the track, took him on around the final turn. You see him put that horse away through the stretch, but Ain't Life Grand, who's a really nice horse in his own right, just had a perfect trip and came running through the stretch to close that race down. Frosted Grace, a really good performance last time. Also a really good performance 2 starts back when he won with a 99 Beyer speed figure, sitting a stalking trip, taking the race to Capuna, who's back in this field around the final turn, and outfinished him through the stretch. This horse is in good form right now. There's a good trip coming for him. He's 6-1 on the morning line, which I think is a fair price. We'll see how that all shakes out. But I think Frosted Grace is definitely a contender in this Steve Sexton Mile. The number 6 is Sonneman, coming off of a win for trainer Steve Asmussen, who's had him for a really long time. They tried this horse in some stakes races on the go back, and he ran okay. Could never really break through at that level, but he was competitive at times. Things never really panned out for Sonneman. He doesn't win that often. He did get a win in his most recent start. We'll look at the replay of that right now. This is over course and distance here at Lone Star Park. It's a 2x allowance optional 30 claimer. He's in for the 30, and he wins easily. Got a good trip in this race. Strong run around the final turn to take over, and he just drives away from that field through the stretch. So a good performance, not against much of a field, I didn't think. Carl Broberg reached in for the 30 and finally took him off of Asmussen's hands. Broberg does a good job overall. He does a good job off the claim as well. He's going to move this horse way up in class for this, and we'll see how that's going to work out. I thought it was going to be maybe a little bit too tough, but we'll see. The number 7 Silver Prospector, again, he's the defending champion of this race, has plenty of credentials to just look at on paper and say he's a major player in here. I don't disagree with that. I really liked the race that he ran here last year when he won this race. He just stayed on the outside, basically a 4-wide trip around the track, never letting the pace get too far away. He was really game. He worked really hard through the stretch, but he finally closed it down at the end. It was a good performance. This field might be even tougher than that one, however, and we'll see if he gets, what kind of trip he pulls this time. He can easily win here. I'm not way against him. He's just one of those horses who I never really am that interested in taking too short of a price on. So we'll see how that all shakes out come post time. He's 4-1 on the morning line. I think that's fair. I certainly wouldn't go any lower than that. He's a contender in this race, to be sure. Endorsed is the 8. Again, a horse who has plenty of races that you could just pull out of his overall form and say that race would make him really tough in here. And he finally got back into good form over the winter at Gulfstream Park. He was on a really long losing streak, and he finally broke through in the Grade 3 Hooper, a 1-turn mile at the end of January. He won that race. He came right back in the Grade 2 Gulfstream Park mile, another 1-turn mile. Took the race to heavy favorite Charge It, outfinished that horse easily, 101 Beyer, really good performance. They tried a Grade 1 going 7 furlongs on Derby weekend. It didn't work out for him in that race. He got a decent trip, was no match, came up completely empty in the final furlong. But I wouldn't hold that race against him too much. I like to see him getting back in good form over the winter, and maybe he can bounce back here. He's been mostly competing in one-turn races recently, but you can go back and look. He's got races around 2 turns and going the mile that are fine and give him a real chance in this race. I'm not way against him. He's just another horse that I probably wouldn't sell on a short price with, but I can easily see him bouncing back and running better in this Steve Sexton Mile. The number 9, Coco Como. He's got his work cut out for him here. This is a horse who's pretty versatile, can handle any kind of racing surface really. He's also a horse who's probably going to be a little bit further back off the pace in this race, so that could work. I could really see them just sort of sitting back and trying to make one run into this race, and we'll see how it all works out. His most recent dirt start, which we're going to look at right now, this is 2 starts back on April 30th. It is here at Lone Star over this distance, and it's an optional claiming race. And he runs fine in here. He's only second best at the end. He comes around the outside. The winner is going to get through on the inside. These 2 horses sat back off the pace, last and next to last, and they came running through the stretch. I thought Coco Como ran well in here and almost got the job done, but at the end he just misses. 90 Beyer. It's a good performance. His recent form is good. He is moving way up in class for this, however. The number 10 is Logical Myth. One of the bigger prices who I thought was at least a little interested in this race. A horse who's concentrated mostly on turf throughout his career. And he's a good turf horse. He's got really strong credentials in graded stakes races on the grass. But every once in a while, he'll wind up in a dirt race. And when it happens, he tends to run really, really well. Most recently, they sort of switched him to dirt on purpose, it feels like, towards the end of last year. Zia Park in a $100,000 stakes race going 9 furlongs. And he ran fine that day. 97 Beyer. He was only second best in there. But I thought he ran pretty well. He was really, really game through the stretch when he was challenged and didn't just let the horse that beat him sort of waltz by him in the stretch. And you'll notice that a good 7+ lengths behind him that day was Mind That Star. So that was a good performance. His next start wasn't quite as good when they moved him in to take on some tougher horses at Oaklawn Park. So we'll see. There are class concerns on this surface for sure, but I don't mind them coming back to dirt with this horse, especially at a big price. And he's a horse who feels like maybe they can just be a little more patient with him. In that Zia race that we talked about, he was close to the pace. I feel like they could take him back a little bit more here and try to make one run, and that could really work. Touch Upon a Star is the money line favorite, the number 11. And again, it's all right there for you to see on paper. He's 7 for 9 lifetime. He has now won 6 races in a row in absolute blowout fashion. They're all against Louisiana breds. He's never run against horses like this, but he has good speed. He could make the lead in here. We'll see how fast he has to go to get there. It's really all about whether he classes up in here. The Beyer speed figures suggest that he is good enough to beat horses like this. He's run one fast race after another recently, and if he runs another triple-digit Beyer in here, he's going to be really tough, but he has to do it against better horses. He has to do it from a tough outside post, and he might have to go fast early. These are all things that you have to concern yourself with for a horse who's the money line favorite. We'll see what kind of price he goes off at. I'm not way against him. I don't think I would bet him at a short price. Capuna is the number 12, another horse with speed from the outside, another horse whose recent form is actually pretty good. His last 2 dirt races in particular, he didn't win either of them, but he ran really well both times. One of those was that Frosted Grace race that I was talking about before. He made the lead in there. Frosted Grace came to challenge him around the turn, and this horse really fought. 98 Beyer. He was only second best that day, but he ran well. Another good performance last time in a 1-turn mile at Churchill Downs on Derby weekend with a 99 Beyer. So he's in really good form. He took the worst of the draw as a speed horse from the outside. Maybe he comes out of there running. He just sort of tries to follow Touch Upon a Star into the race, and maybe he just falls into a really good trip here. I could see it happening. I don't love the 5-to-1 morning line price on him, but I do like his recent form. I kind of wanted to go in some other directions and not take the 2 horses towards the outside, although I do think they're contenders. So we'll get the picks up there now. Wide open race, kind of one of those races where it feels like you want to hunt for a price a little bit. It's also one of those races, it could just be pick one or pick too many. I'm going to pick one, and I like the number 5 in this race. I'm going to take one of the Diodoro horses in here, Frosted Grace. I just like his recent form. I think he's going to get a good trip in this race. The 6-to-1 morning line feels like it's fair enough, and you could do better than that when all is said and done. So I'm going to put Frosted Grace on top in this race. I went 5, 7, 10, and 4. Really good running of the Steve Sexton Mile, Grade 3, closing out that Memorial Day Monday card at Lone Star Park. That approximate post time is 8:05 Eastern Time. Good luck.